G'day, Ben from Duck Plain Chicken here with the next video in the build series of the Arii 1/170th scale Macross factory, the one with the VF-1A Armored Valkyrie. So since the last video I've just given everything a gloss varnish, just using SMS clear gloss, and now it's time to do some panel lining. So I'm going to be using the Tamiya accent color products, and for things like the floor and also for the rear wall, I'll be using black. And you want to make sure you give this stuff a really good shake because it does tend to separate, and because it's an enamel product it doesn't interfere with the lacquer paint underneath. And hopefully it's going to come out okay on camera. So just touch it to these panel lines, and it uses capillary action to basically travel along those lines. And wherever those little dabs occur, it doesn't matter because we'll be going in and cleaning that up. Alright, so that's what I'll be doing for the floor. And I'll also use black on the walls as well, so even for the yellow parts I'll be able to see it work a little bit clearer. You can see how that sort of just wicks into all the panel lines there. You sort of get an idea of how that'll work. Now this, of course, this model has lots of sort of different colours on it. So for the trolley here, so in these sort of grid areas, I think it might be a bit too much if I just use black. So what I might do is I'll use this brown. I'll see how that looks. Might look too much like a rust or something, so give it a test, and because I don't want it to look as though there's I think, yeah, it'd be too much if I just use black. Let's see how this looks. Ooh, way too much. Nothing that a cotton bud can't fix. Okay, so I might yeah, use brown for some of those areas. Now, of course, we've got some white areas like for the missiles, so for that I'll be using grey. Now for the Valkyrie itself, there's of course a lot of different sort of colours. I think predominantly I'm going to be using black, but there may be some areas like where it's sort of white, just the white areas I'll probably use a bit of grey. So let's do that for this little area on the front of the shoulder. Something like that. And we can use black for the sort of green areas. There's some heavy panel lines on the arms, so you're going to need a little bit of paint to be able to fill up those areas. So when we have a look at the backpack, most of that is going to be in the black. Right, now for the figures, I'll use, I think I'll use maybe some dark grey. Let's see how this goes on the jumpsuit. I may have to go with black, but I think black might be a bit too much. So let's see, here we go. Yeah, it's obviously way too much, but I think that will probably work. So you can see it's bringing out some of those details. It's not sort of far from perfect, but so if I use the dark grey for that, and then for the face I'm just going to use some orange brown. Yeah, this figure has a pretty featureless face, but so at least it adds a bit of warmth to the skin colour. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and finish off the panel lines for everything else. With a combination of the accent colours I've used here. So when I come back I will show you how to clean it up. Time to clean up the panel lining I've done, and for that I actually use Shellite, but you can use an animal thinner. We'll do the same thing, or lighter fluid. So I just use this stuff because it's nice and cheap. I'll decant a little bit of it into a smaller container so I can use a cotton bud to dunk it in, dab off the excess on paper towel, and then just wipe across. Now I've allowed the panel liner to dry for about 5 or 6 hours, so that way I find I can rub reasonably vigorously across the line and not draw too much of the paint out of the panel line, so trying to keep it where I want it. Something sort of like that, and you can see a few smudges here and there, so that's what I'll pick up in the second time around. So you can sort of see some smudges around this area, a few other areas, but overall it's a lot cleaner than what it was. So I'll go ahead and clean up the rest of the parts, and then it should be ready for a matte coat. I may come back and sort of glue the switch and the socket in before I do the matte coat. I started on the electronics on the base, so I've got the USB port there, and of course positive going from that to the switch, and then the other positive from the switch will go to the LEDs, and the negative just from the USB. So it's a pretty basic sort of circuit, but what I need to do is stick these electronic components in using some 2-part epoxy putty. So for that I use this stuff from Infinity Premium Magic Putty. I find this stuff's good because it's got a reasonable amount of working time. It's just 2 parts, 2 equal parts, if it'll focus, 2 equal parts, and you just knead them together like most 2-part putties. Now, of course, it doesn't have to look pretty because it's not going to be seen under the base here, so it's really just about making sure it's more practical more than anything else. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think the switch will still slide in there. So next thing I need to do is get this fixed. I don't think I'll need to mix up any more. I think this will probably be enough. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And of course this hole is where the other wiring from the back will come in. So I'll leave that for a good 24 hours, and I can sort of continue on with some other stuff while I'm waiting for that to cure. Time for decals, and I've got to say this is one thing that's kind of got me a little bit concerned, just because of the issues I had with the other decals on the other kit. I've started the decals off camera just because I was a little bit concerned about the state of these decals, especially after the last set, which were completely disastrous. Now thankfully I've had to, I've been able to get some of them down. The UN Spacey kite logo thing, thankfully that's down. That's really hard for me to replicate that one, because if you print it on white decal paper, of course you have to cut around the circle exactly, and that sounds like too much hard work. So I managed to get that one down, and a little number on this leg here, 115. I've managed to get the 5 down on the torso here, but so the issue that I'm having with these decals is that they require warm water and they require a long soak before they actually come loose. So I'll take you through, let's see, I'll do one of these VF logos. Let's see how we go with that. Cut the VF logo out, and I'm going to use a trick that I actually learnt from a YouTube channel called Imaginary Doc. I believe it's a Japanese modeler, and they do this trick where they don't actually cut all the way through the decal paper. So they actually sort of lift it up, and let's see if we do this on camera. It's almost like you're lifting up the layer that sits on top of the backing paper. So like that. Okay, looks pretty rough. Now, Imaginary Doc talks about it sort of making it easier for the water to soak into the decal and to activate the glue. So I did have some success with this before, and it's a method I haven't really sort of tried before, so let's see how we go. And let's see if we can maneuver this decal into place. Try and get it as centered as possible. Gently roll across. Squeeze any of the moisture out from under the decal. And there we have it. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and try and get the rest of these decals on the Valkyrie, and then might come back and talk about the decals on the actual hanger and some of the accessories and stuff. Okay, I've finished the decals on the Valkyrie, and yeah, they're in pretty rough shape. I managed to get them all down, managed not to rip them too much. You can see like that one's a little bit damaged. I actually had to sort of get the tweezers under the carrier film to lift them off. So not great, but I was that one's a little bit hard to see. I was most worried about this UN Spacey kite logo just because of the white background on it, but that seems to have come up alright. And also the white VF. So managed to get all those down. The next thing is to get some decals down on the base. And if you have a look at the one I've done previously, I've got a number up the top, I've got a kite logo, and I've also got UN Spacey under here. So these are all third-party decals, well, kind of third-party. First of all, I've got a UN Spacey one here, which I've taken from one of the 1/100 wave kits that I built. A different Macross kit. So put that in the water. And same with this kite logo. So that's also from 1/100 wave kit. So dunk that in the water. The other thing I need to do is get the number that I use. So for the previous one I used 03, but this one's actually going to be 01. So these are HIQ parts. These are just sort of a third-party provider of decals. These are really good quality decals. I've had sort of no problems with them at all, and these are the sort of things I always buy when I go over to Japan. I know I've sort of mentioned that before. So I'm going to use the 01 at the top here, because that's what this kit is, I believe. Is it? Yeah, it's the MA-01. So I'm going to use 01 for the labelling of this hanger. Alright, let's just test the water, so to speak. So the decals haven't started lifting just yet. Got my microsole ready to go. I'm also going to position this where I can see it, so I can get the location right of the number and logo. So I'm going to get some microset down first, just up my corner here, and also in this space in here. Okay, these decals are now ready. So I'll just grab this one and maneuver it onto the background here. I want to get this one sort of lined up correctly first. I just want to compare it with the other one, so I'm sort of getting it in the right spot. You can roll the cotton bud over the top of it, squeegee all that moisture out from underneath, and then we're ready for the number to go next to it. Alright, and the last one is the UN spacey, just to go in this gap here. Okay, here we go. Just adds a little bit more interest to that background. The next step is to put some microsole over these decals, just to help them bed down a bit better, dissolve that carrier film a little bit, so that there's not it's not that visible edge around the decals. Okay, so talking about some of the other third-party decals I'm going to use. I'm going to put some of these sort of warning labels down, and these are by Pooh's Modelling Works. Again, you can see I bought these in Japan. I actually used these on the previous version, so you can sort of see down here, there's one there. So I need to sort of grab a couple of them, maybe sort of 2 or 3, and dot them around a couple of spaces. I'll show you these, what you're given with the kit. Look at these, and they're not really that flash. So at least using third-party ones. They give you this extra decal sheet in here as well, but you can see those warnings and stuff aren't really that great. So I'm just not going to bother sort of using those. And let's grab, let's see, one of these small white ones. Beautiful. I'm going to use the same set of decals again, but this time add some to the trolley and also to the tank. Now I think for the tank part I'll go with some red labels, just because potentially there's going to be some dangerous stuff in there, I don't know. Alright, I want to add some hazard stripes as well. And so this is another high Q product. Dark grey and yellow hazard stripes. So let's see, do we have anything it's about the right length. Now I'm going to be using some of these on the floor, so I want to use something slightly different on the trolley. So I think I might use a couple of these ones. Okay. Looks pretty good. It actually says rescue. Yeah, that looks pretty good, I reckon. Right, hazard stripe in the back, sides, a little bit on the front. I reckon that's done. And still sticking with the hazard stripes. This time I want some really thin ones, and will that go? Geez, that's going to go the full length. Alright, so that's good. I'll take one of these ones. These sort of narrow ones, these long narrow ones. So I might have to keep an eye out next time I'm in Japan. Heading over there later on this year. So let's see if we can find a few more of those. Okay, so that's for the trapdoor. Now for the base, the putty still hasn't sort of cured properly just yet, but what we can do is look at maybe just putting a couple of stripes on the side. Yeah. Let's try a couple of these ones. Now if you have a look at the bottom of this one, I put some of that hazard striping sort of on the inside and also on the leading edge of the trapdoors. So that's sort of the theme I'm going with for this one as well. Now when you're doing long sort of narrow pieces like this, it's certainly a lot easier to just hold it at one end, get it started, and then pull the backing piece away. Definitely not as tidy as the other one. You can still see all those bits that I had to sort of sand away. That's alright. It's on the underneath, it's not a massive issue. Can't really get the cotton bud in there to roll across to get rid of all the moisture underneath the decal, so I'm just sort of dabbing it down. Being careful trying not to move the decal as well. I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to go through these decals and just hit them with the Macross. A lot of them are on a flat surface, so it's not so much of an issue. Some of these ones that are on the Valkyrie, you can sort of still see that carrier film a bit, so I'll have to fix that up with some Macross. But getting very close to putting a matte coat on everything. Everything's been given a coat of SMS flat clear, and as to be expected, it does really sort of tie everything together pretty well. Even the rough decals, there's a little bit of silvering there, but it's not too bad. So you can see I've started to put the Valkyrie together, going together fine. But one thing that I need to do before I start sort of assembling everything and finishing up the electronics is just a little bit of dry brushing. It was something I did on the previous model in the series that I did. So just for these dark areas, just to bring out some of the details. And I want to do a little bit of dry brushing on these tanks. Just a little bit of raised detail there that I can pick out with the dry brushing. So for the dry brushing, I'm going to use this Vallejo Mecha Color, if it'll focus, medium grey. And of course anyone watching this channel is probably well aware of how to dry brush. Just a little bit of paint on the brush, and then you want to get rid of as much of it as you can on the paper towel. And then we're just going to gently brush across the surface just to pick out a couple of edges. Really doesn't take very much, and certainly at this scale you don't want to be overdoing it. So you see, it's really just very subtle, and you know, you can see how it sort of picks out those rivets there, picks out some of the detail on those box things, and that's it. That's really all the dry brushing I need to do for that particular part. Again, you can see there's next to no paint sort of on the paper when I'm ready to dry brush. And you can already see that's sort of picked out the edges. So don't be fooled just because you can't see it on the paper it doesn't mean there's not any paint on your paintbrush. There's still going to be a small amount, and in this case it will be just enough. Right, and that's it for the dry brushing. Not much at all. Okay, for sticking the legs together I'm just going to use this Revell contactor cement. It's a little bit thicker than the sort of, to me, extra thin. And what I'm going to do is just put a little bit around this peg here. Make sure I've got it around the right way. Alright, so I'm going to stand the, because one of these legs is a little bit loose, like this one here, I'm just going to stand it up so that way it sets so that the Valkyrie's standing level on the ground. Seems he's got a little bit of a twisted leg, but that's alright, as long as he stands straight and flat on the floor, I think that'll be okay. So I'm just going to leave that to dry. Okay, now obviously I've got to wire up all the lighting, finish all that off. These struts that have the lights embedded in them, I need to get the back sort of sliding into that little slot there on the girder. Now, for the previous versions, I just drilled a hole in there, but I think what I actually need is a slot, so that way I can push it down without pinching the wires. I know with the last one I got a bit of pinching, so I think if I drill a hole first, and then I can cut it out as a slot. So let's give that a shot. Okay, I've cut out a slot up in the top right-hand corner there, and I had a bit of a mishap. It is actually about to snap off, but I think it'll be fine once it's glued. And so the whole idea is that these wires coming out of the back of the girder here, it actually just sort of slots in, and so that looks nice and tidy. At the back, the wires are not being crimped in any way. We are through, and now it's a matter of sort of cutting out the rest of the slot. Alright, nice clean slot ready for the other girder, and that just slots in there beautifully. Again, there's no pinching of the wires in the back. Bit of glue in there once it's sort of all together, and it'll be good to go. Alright, so I just want to talk a little bit about my plan for the wiring I'm doing here on the back of the hanger. My LEDs are rated to 3 volt voltage drop, and I already know I want them running at sort of 5 milliamps, the current going through them, so that should make them bright enough for what I need. I've used a website to calculate the resistor value I need, because I've got 6 LEDs, so I'm going to be wiring it up in parallel, and I know that I want to put 5 milliamps current through them. So what's happened is when I put that into the calculator, because I don't know this stuff off by heart, so if there's a calculator there I'm going to use it. So it's basically recommends that I use 68 ohm resistors, so that's what I have here. So what I'm going to do is wire up a resistor to each of the the positive leads. So there'll be 2 here, 2 here, and then I'm going to sort of join it all up, because eventually what I want is just one positive and one negative wire coming down the bottom here, and then be plugged into the power supply in the base. Okay, so you can get an idea what I've done here. Basically connected all the negative leads to just a single wire. I've got all the positives hooked up to their individual resistors, and then that comes out to a single lead as well. So now that'll be able to run down the back and go into the base as just two wires, make it a little bit easier on myself. So I'm going to put them to the side for a bit now, because there's a few other things I want to do first. I had a little bit of a drama getting this walkway on. It's got two pegs that come through holes in the back here. Both those pegs broke off. So it's not so much of an issue. There's actually, you can sort of see how it sits in there. There's like a groove that it sits in. And so I've sort of friction fit with the layers of paint and everything, so it does stay there. And then I've just poured a little bit of contactor cement into these two holes. So I'm waiting for that to dry because I want to see if that holds or not. And if that's okay, then I can put the railing on it and of course the steps. So, but you know, it's getting there. I'll leave that to dry. The other thing I've done is just attach the trapdoor. So that slides all the way open. Looks reasonably okay, I think. So now I've got to put the two lights in here. But I think what I'm going to do is do a lot of the wiring first and the soldering before I actually stick them in place. Some electronics I've done off camera. These are the two LEDs that are going to go into the base. I've already wired up the resistors to them, and they go to sort of a single positive and negative, and then I've just used a pin header here so that I can sort of plug it into a block like this. So basically it's basically two rows, positive and negative. So the input from the USB will go into one of them, and then the other two plugs are for the lights. I've also done the plug for the USB. So that'll plug in like so. And then this one will plug in like so. And this is really just because when I get the last LEDs through the base here, through this hole, I don't want to be doing any soldering underneath because there's going to be sort of the rest of the structure underneath. So I want to just be able to sort of plug it in, and then it's all ready to go. So that's why I've done that. And of course all this stuff I can just tape down once it's sort of done. So let's blue tack this out of the way because I need to attach these LEDs to the two holes that are drilled out underneath the missile bay. UV resin I'm using is just this cheapo UV resin, similar stuff to what you get in a 3D printer. This stuff's readily available on eBay, AliExpress, Amazon, wherever you buy your UV resin from. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just dunk this good and proper in the UV resin. So get a lot of it on there, and then without making too much of a mess, trying to get it lined up in the hole. Very careful with these bits here. The pre-wired LEDs are good as far as the fact that they are pre-wired and they're small. The problem is they use pretty cheap wire and it's very narrow gauge, so it does tend to break, unfortunately. Yeah, so if we can get this reasonably flat, I might just hit it with some UV resin. Because I've got a fair bit of resin on there, I've got to keep it on for a while. But this is just to make sure that those sort of really fine wires don't come a cropper. Alright, that's now held in place. Enough room to get these wires sort of double backing on themselves. Let's get these plugged in. I'll just use some tape, I think, once I've got everything sort of in place. So literally all I need to do is the wires from the back wall go into here and plug in the back. Okay, so it's all very temporary until I get the back wall on. Okay, I'm in the process of test fitting everything, and looks like it's going to be reasonably square. I've had to make a few sort of minor tweaks here and there, so as I glue this together I'm going to talk about that. Let's remove this top bit. So the first thing I did was attach these two cross members to these uprights here. I did have some issues where the pegs broke, but it's fine because I just glued them in place, so that has worked reasonably well. Now for the back wall, I've attached this piece up here, the handrail, and also the steps. Now when you're installing the steps, you want to make sure that you've got the floor in place, because you just want to make sure the steps are sort of sitting on the actual floor when you position them. Just notice the railings coming out here. Let's go there. Push that in a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I've got to try and get glue in everything and then try and line it all up and hold it in place. So the first thing I think I'll do is get some glue in this area here, and you can sort of get the back wall in place. Actually, before I do that, I should show you, I've had to drill out these holes here. So they're drilled them out with a 2.5mm diameter drill bit, and that's perfect. So it's accounted for the paint that's built up on the rails here. So they now fit okay. Alright, so let's put that out of the way. Now I am putting a fair bit of extra thin in here because I want a little bit of wriggle room with the back wall. So as I sort of line up all these pieces, I don't necessarily want the back wall to sort of be, you know, completely fixed in place. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is put this front brace in. I think for that I might use a little bit of the thicker contactor cement. Just get a little bit there. And when I was gluing this together, I actually used the grid lines on the cutting mat to make sure it was all reasonably square. So, okay. Alright, now the next thing is I need to get this rail sort of in here, and I need to get some glue on both sides. need that to set up just a little bit, or otherwise it's probably not going to hold in place. So just you know, some other parts that I've sort of assembled, just while I'm waiting for that to dry. We have the little missile trolley. That's come up pretty well. I haven't glued these missiles down, of course, because I want to put one in the missile bay there. I've attached this tank thing to the yellow beam. There's little wheels that attach to this and sort of slot in the rails on the front and the back wall. And now my Valkyrie legs have dried. He's looking pretty good. I just need to glue the backpack in place for that. And then there's the figures, which I haven't yet taken off their stand yet. I think that's sort of set up a little bit. So now we'll try and get some glue on these bits without making too much of a mess. These back pieces are just lifting up just a little bit, so I'm sort of trying to hold them down. It's not a massive amount, but I think I might use some tape or something just to hold them in place. Now, the rest of it is about getting it all square. And I remember I had some issues with the last one that I did, just trying to get it lined up properly. And I'm thinking I might actually use the grid lines on the cutting mat again, because at least then I'll have an idea of how square it is. It won't all fall apart. But yeah, I can see that's a long way off being square. Okay, so I am going to let that sit. It's a bit hard to sort of show, but I've tried to get it as square as possible. It's actually a little bit tricky. There's I don't know, there's something's out somewhere and I can't work out where it is. I'm sure I'll find out once it's all glued up, because that's the way these things work. Okay, all the frame has had a good chance to dry, and now I've just plugged it in, and let's see if it works. So you see the two lights down the bottom there. And if I turn it up, you can see the four lights on the top of the girders there. I've stuck the backpack onto the Valkyrie, so I'm pretty happy with the way that's come up. There's a few rough spots on it, but it's not too bad. Now for the figures, I'm not holding my breath here as to how well these will go taking them off the painting stands I've got. What I'm going to do is try and carefully lever them off the stand, so you can hear that crack. If you remember back to the first episode of this series, I used super glue. So super glue, of course, is quite brittle, or stone acrylite. It's quite brittle, so it means that it's likely to give more than the plastic is. But given that I sort of tried to get them as flat to the surface as possible, you can see this guy now stands up on his own. So that's pretty good. Some of these other ones I'm a bit worried about because they've got sort of smaller footprint, I guess. So let's try and carefully snap that one off. And there's a little bit of trimming I want to do on the feet. You can sort of see they're a little bit clunky. Okay, that's a little bit better. Just a little bit. But that one stands up. It's a little bit more delicate than the other one, just because it's got a smaller footprint. And probably the worst one is going to be this one, because this one has a very small footprint, and what's happened is when I put the super glue on, it basically looks like she's growing out of the ground. So let's see how this goes. I might try and get a knife under there actually. Here we go. Because I'm a bit worried about this one being quite narrow at the level of the feet. And it's a massive bit of super glue, but at least it means I can trim that to the point where she'll actually stand itself. Now for this crane device, I've glued these bits on the end, and I've done a bit of a test fit, but I don't think it's going to fit properly. Yeah, it's just out. It's just out. Not by much. Let's see if I can get this on camera. So you can see those pegs sitting on top of that rail. Yeah, they should be down a little bit. They should be sort of, because there's actually wheels that go on this thing. I've just glued these on, so I wonder if I could take that off. I'm almost thinking of taking literally just a fraction off that end there, and then gluing this back on, and that'll give us the length I need. Because it really doesn't need to be that much. So you can sort of see what I'm doing here, just cutting it back just a fraction. Alright, let's see, here we go here. Try go something like that. Alright, I think we're there. It now sits on that rail, which is good. So thankfully it's a reasonably easy fix. And try and get the wheels on this end. Yeah, the other one's falling out. Okay, I think we have it nearly there. I think it's just a matter of sort of allowing this glue to dry. It's not sitting in there quite right. That's better. Now the rollers are actually sitting in the tracks that they should be, and it actually does freewheel. Okay, I didn't expect that to actually work. Just a few comments on the kit. I think anyone who regularly watches my channel knows that I love these older kits, even though they're a challenge. There's obviously lots of seams to deal with, and you know, parts that don't have sharp detail on them, but you know, still to me these are just so creative, like in the way that they package these in sort of small model kits. You could get the whole set and sort of stack them together. Yeah, definitely sort of my favorite types of kit. So, I mean, the only real issue I had with this was the decals, which I half expected given the age of it. Thankfully, I didn't have to sort of go to using any of my homemade ones that I did for the previous kit. So I was especially concerned about that for the decals that have white on them, because I can't sort of, produce them. The other thing I'm going to try in the photos is try stacking this one next to the other one. So we've got, we'll have 01 and 03, and then as I build the other kits, I've got all 4 of them, so as I've got the other kits, I'll build those as well. They might be a few months off. I do like to take a break between these ones as much as I could sort of build these things until the end of days. I like to savour them a little bit, so I've got 2 more to go, and I'm not looking forward to, running out of these kits to build. So that's it for now. Until the next build series. I'll catch you later.